Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Los Angeles City Hall for the regularly scheduled committee hearing of homelessness and poverty. I'd like to ask everyone to please take a seat. We will get this committee hearing underway. My name is Mitch O'Farrell. I'm the new chair of this committee. I want to thank Marquise Harris Dawson for being the chair of this committee since its inception. We are joined today by our colleagues David Rue, our vice chair of this committee, Monica Rodriguez, and our colleague Mike Bonin. I'd like to welcome everyone to the council chambers, and we will officially bring this meeting to order. What I'd like to do, colleagues, is just say a few words about a perspective that I bring to the proceedings, and that is a knowledge that when the price of housing is factored in, the state of California basically has the highest poverty rate of any state in the country. Los Angeles has a higher poverty rate than the rest of the state of California, so that explains some of the challenges that we face in the city of Los Angeles. Homelessness and poverty are directly linked, and we all see that in our neighborhoods across the city. I think I join all of my colleagues in expressing appreciation again to voters over the past couple of years who have passed measures HHH to build permanent supportive housing and other services and bridge housing, and then Measure H, which is the county-wide initiative to provide the services to go in concert with all of the housing that we're able to produce. It is imperative that we as a city honor the will of the voter, and that is that we will effectuate the production of quality housing for people affected by homelessness, that we do it with efficiency and with urgency, and that it's going to take the whole spectrum of housing types, including preservation, to keep people who are vulnerable to being homeless, becoming homeless, and then housing those who have been homeless temporarily or in some cases for years and even decades. So I think we all know the challenge that we're up to, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the collective choir today. But I want to give everyone a sense that as the representative of the 13th District, I'm very well aware of the challenges that we all face in our neighborhoods, having among the highest level of homelessness of any council district. I think we're number 3, if I'm not mistaken. But my team and I have been working since July 1st of 2013 on issues related to those afflicted with homelessness or affected by homelessness. And I couldn't be happier to take on this challenge. I look forward to working with everyone to help solve this crisis and make a real difference and bring the numbers down significantly. We can do that. We have the resources, we have the willpower, we have the determination. We certainly have the talent. And I know that we have an all-hands-on-deck approach, and I am very grateful for that. So having said that, colleagues, what I'd like to do is take multiple item comments first, and we will start with someone who placed the name Jed Perriott. Jed Perriott? Please step forward, Mr. Perriott, and you'll have 2 minutes for all of the items that you filled comment cards for, and then 1 minute for general public comment. Thank you.
Hi there, Jed Perriott, co-chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee for the Democratic Socialists of America. And so we wait. We wait for answers to the questions, where's the money? And more importantly, as we're talking about monies that the city of LA voted to tax themselves to provide housing. And so the question is, where's the housing? Where is the housing? Perhaps Ron Galperin can tell us. Perhaps the FBI can tell us what's happening. What we do know for sure is that as we wait The city continues at an alarming rate to address this crisis with policies of banishment, criminalization, and the destruction of vital personal belongings, no doubt contributing to the ever-rising death toll year by year in this city. 831 in 2017, up to 1,200, according to LA Times, in 2018. And we must remember that as we talk about housing and encampments, we must talk about people. It is people, people's lives that we're talking about here. People like my friend Lee, a school teacher who had to choose between his health care or paying rent, lived in his car, then lived in a tent, lost his medication in an unnoticed police and sanitation sweep. He died in 2018 in a hospital. Other folks across the city, just last week, people being raided unnoticed in Van Nuys, in Venice, even right here at El Pueblo, supposedly where the unhoused are supposed to be getting help and outreach. People losing vital belongings like blankets, medicine, someone's purse literally dumped into a garbage truck. And so these are lives that are dying every day. And for what? To please perhaps the business community that is here today to speak out against the Mitchell injunction. Folks who care more about the bottom line than the real lives here, who just need help. You know, there's a way to address public health and safety, which is what you all justify these policies on. There's a way to address that that's not destroying people's property and sending armies of police. In fact, Mitch O'Farrell, in your district, we have a prime example. Pit stop bathrooms, needle drop boxes, trash cans have been the only thing that's made a difference at the Alvarado encampment. The 5611 sweeps and clean streets raids did nothing to address the needles that Councilmember Rodriguez once complained to me about, the children that have to walk by needles. Or feces in the street. No, there's a way to address public health and safety, but ultimately it is housing. And we wait and we ask for how much longer.
Thank you. Next we have Antonia Ramirez. Antonia Ramirez. One minute for general and 2 minutes for multiple items.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, public comment first. I went first to Downtown Women's Center, located at 442 South San Pedro Street, Los Angeles, 90013. I went there to ask for blankets. I didn't have any blankets. Of course, we get robbed as homeless women. We get robbed, attacked, and beaten, everything. So I went there to ask for blankets, and they told me, no, we don't have any available. You'll have to come on a specific date. It's in the 30s and 40s, and I couldn't get a blanket. So I'm hustling with my shopping cart all the way back, and I didn't know where to go. I went to Union Rescue Mission. I went to the LA Mission. I went everywhere. Could not get a freaking blanket. Then I went to Iglesia Nuestra Señora Reina de Los Ángeles, located at 535 North Main Street, Los Angeles, California, 90012. And they said, well, the social worker's not here. We can't give you any blankets. They have blankets, but they couldn't give it to me. And I'm not the only one that was in line asking for blankets. Ladies and gentlemen, American citizens were asking for blankets. Nobody, none of these stupid goddamn nonprofit shelters would give us a blanket. I ended up having to go to La Placita, and God bless this one little Latina girl at La Placita. She sold me a blanket for $25 each. So I bought two blankets.
You should be on your items by now.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, speaking of number one, you talk about black homeless. You know, there are lovely black people on the streets. It's your niggers that are committing the crimes in Los Angeles. And I've been a victim of that too. Help your black females and your black males, and there's only a handful. They are lovely. They are wonderful. They are victims of crime like myself. So help them. Stop helping those who are committing the crimes. Put them in the goddamn can or rehab. You do not find them a house. You put them in jail where they belong, in a good kick in the ass. And then LASA, fuck LASA. They do not help you. They come around with bullshit up your ass. Yes, we're going to do this. We've got this ready for you. Yes, we're going to do this. We're working on it. They don't do shit. Neither do citizens. Concerned citizens. They don't help. Stop funding them. shut them down, because all they do is promise you bullshit up your ass and you're stupid enough to believe it. Forget it. Close them down and get that money back and give it to us, the homeless people, and get us a place to live. Those of us who are not drug addicts, those who are boozers, those who are out there committing crimes. A home for those, and those who need help, they need rehab and jail. And again, we need somebody to provide us blankets on Main Street, please. The homeless between 1st and Temple, provide us with blankets and tents and supplies. We're asking for that right now for the cold weather. Yeah, I'm not the only one. Several people have come up to me and asked me for things, supplies and tents and blankets. I've given mine away, and I end up in trouble myself, and it becomes very cold. So, ladies and gentlemen, public safety is also an issue. We're not addressing public safety. There's a lot of women and good people who are being attacked and robbed and beat every single day. Knock it off. Cut the shit. Address it.
Okay.
Do something.
Wayne
Kill the
Spindler,
motherfuckers.
Wayne
Thank
Spindler, you have 1 minute for general and 2 minutes for your multiple items.
That's right. We start the day with Carl Mitchell versus the city of Los Angeles. All you Jose Weezer fans, what you've done in the 14th district is take people and turn them into mud. Fucking taking and rousting these people, taking their stuff. And all you motherfuckers do is you go to the city attorney and spend money on more lawyers. Since 2016, this shit been going on. When's it gonna stop? It's gonna stop today, because Jose Weezer going to federal prison. Let's give it a hand. As that is what he been doing. Also what he been doing is pushing his homeless west into the 1st district in Koreatown. Because I talk to the Korean people and I say, Yuga so, and they say, Jose Weezer, he pushing all these homeless motherfuckers in our fucking district. So that's what you do. It's a two-pronged problem. And the enemy is Lhasa. Lhasa is the enemy. Lhasa is a word in Chinese that means campaign donation. Look it up. Lhasa is nothing but a money laundering operation with Michaela, and a whole fucking city hall is stealing the money, which goes perfect with the HHH. And I constantly bitch about this fucking HHH stolen money. And that's why Herb Wesson Take and Marquizzi Harris Dawson, who changed his name to Marquizzi Weezer Dawson. And he's married a horse on top of it, and now he's off. Now he got to get his ass out of here. So who do we put in there? We put in Monica Rodriguez as the chair? No. Do we put in anybody else? We put Mitch O'Farrell in because he's the Hollywood queen. He is the leader and the successor in interest of Eric Garcetti, the criminal, of Hollywood. So it's all one big shell game. I got this shell with this criminal. I'll move it over here to the left and to the right. And it's been 3 months since the FBI raid. And who has been indicted? Nobody. No charges have been filed. And Marquise keeps saying, when are they going to put them in jail? And they say, fool, you the one going down. And he go, never mind. So it's a new day. It's the same shit every day. I say, go ahead. Let's litigate it. Give it to the jury and Carl Mitchell. Yeah, kick your ass out of City Hall and put Jose Weezer to federal prison where his dumb ass belongs.
All right, we have Pete White, and you have filled out comment cards for items 1, 2, 4, and 5. Pete White. Mr. White, so you'll have 2 minutes for your multiple items.
Yes, Pete White with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. I think the first thing, I think it's important that the city of Los Angeles move forward to settle the Mitchell lawsuit. We continue to hear that you care, but it appears that care does not extend to the constitutional protections, which is the basis of Mitchell. While many of those in opposition today will speak in opposition to Mitchell, we of course will see them reemerge in the growing FBI corruption scandal. We're very clear that some of the same folks who are informing you not to settle Mitchell will be seen and heard again. I think the other thing, just in terms of the HHH audit that you're calling for. So over the past 2 years, LA Can has pushed for a forensic audit of HHH. In addition to running community engagement programs targeting registered voters, we've written reports, provided public testimony before committees responsible for HHH implementation, and created community-based content demanding an audit of HHH. So it is indeed interesting to find ourselves in a place where now 2 audits are being scheduled for release. You're calling for an audit, and then the Controller's Office is also calling for an audit performed by a third party. It's very interesting to us because we're sure that the Controller's Office clearly does not want to get tied up in controversy that is roiling this building. I want to submit to your committee all show and no substance. It's a performance audit that we created in November 2017, if you can take this. Additionally, we want to submit for public record an email that we received from the Controller's Office at the end of November that said the Controller's Office, not a third party, would conduct an audit of HHH.
Thank you, Mr. White. We'll take those and we'll take a look at them. Thank you. Next speaker will be Val Carlson. Val Carlson will speak on items 1, 2, and 5, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak on those items.
Thank you. My name is Val Carlson. I'm with the End Homelessness Now LA campaign, and I'm here to urge you to take a really close look and reevaluate how this HHH thing is being done. It's been 2 years, 2 years and a few months since it was passed, and not a single door is open to homeless people in Los Angeles. All we hear about is the cost going up and up and up. Now it's $500,000 or so per unit. Where I live in South LA, whole houses with several bedrooms are selling for less than that. I'm not quite sure why it takes so much to do this, except that an awful lot of developers, landowners, bureaucrats, and people are getting paid to process things, running in circles of bureaucratic paperwork. I appreciate your call for a report from the city in 30 days to lay out everything they've been doing and are planning to do with HHH. That should have been information provided all the way along. I also noticed in the paper the other day that there's a new program under HHH to take 10% of the money and try to let the developers come up with proposals to try to do it a little cheaper and faster. The Oversight Committee was recommending this as a pilot program. Again, 2 years in is a little late for a pilot program. But the most important thing that concerns me right now is what I saw in an article about Article 34 of the state constitution, which requires voting to take place before public housing can be built. However, that article states that in 2008, a ballot measure passed here that gave every single district the capacity to build up to 3,500 units of public housing. And it mentions that some of them may be getting close to their limit and may have to do the vote again. But I think your request should also ask the city and every one of you in your districts and every member in their districts to find out what that capacity is and lay that out there and start building public permanent supportive housing immediately.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Our next speaker is the name General Dogan. And you have filled out for items 4 and 5.
General Dogon, LA Can. Proposition HHH was passed with a joint effort from the city and community. You didn't do the door knocking, the phone banking, and the voting. We did, right? It took a joint effort from the city and community to pass HHH. And it would take that continued joint effort, right, to ensure that those 10,000 units get built. Without the FBI investigating our integrity to build housing for the houseless, right? We are experts too. We do our own community-based research, and we write our own reports, just like Mr. White was talking about, right? And so just wanted to just say that until you invite community to the table, we always going to have problems. And for us with Mitchell, we already know. You got a certain group of people, right, that since, I don't know, for the last 15 years, they've been complaining, coming here talking about the same thing. All they want to do is steal downtown for their own self so that they can turn downtown to a playground for the privileged, so they could rob the tourists and people alike for the two or three pieces of copper that they got in their pocket. This ain't the time to be continue criminalizing homeless. This is the time to fight for housing. Stop the criminalization and move forward with housing, or you're going to find this is the wrong time to start criminalizing homeless people with new anti-homeless litigation with all the stuff you already got on the table. Don't do it. Take the deal.
Thank you. We have Howard Rubin Roy. Howard Rubin Roy. General public comment, 1 minute, and then 1 minute for item 4.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Howard Rubin Roy. I'm a 10-year resident of downtown LA in the South Park area.
Can you lean it a little bit to the microphone? Thank you, sir.
Yes. A trial attorney of almost 50 years, 25 of which have been practicing downtown, and a volunteer, longtime volunteer, for Skid Row Trust, where many of our buildings have been taken over by the drug gangs. I'm here to speak against the settlement of the Mitchell case. Surrendering to a lawsuit which offers no solution to the problem other than to allow people to wallow in their own filth and misery is a disservice to both those people and to those who have to contend with them. It's an abdication of the duty of the council, the supervisors, and against California law to abdicate those responsibilities.
Sir, did you want to speak on general public comment as well?
Yes.
Now's the time.
Okay. Homelessness is a true problem. The voters have mandated that money be spent for that. We voted for that. And it's time for the council, the supervisors, and our other representatives to take care of this problem. But surrendering to a lawsuit which has no purpose other than to dehumanize people is not the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Jasmine. Jasmine, general public comment, and then item number 4, you'll have 1 minute for each.
Combine them?
I'm sorry?
Can I combine them? I just want to speak on...
You're supposed to speak 1 minute on general and then 1 minute on...
All right. Okay. My name is Jasmine. I've been a resident since 2003. I actually live in affordable housing myself, so I am compassionate to both sides of the issue here. I do want to read something from, it's an account by a homeless person that was posted on Facebook page, All Eyes on Me, and this is his words describing the situation and why I think it supports not settling the Mitchell case. Hardcore drugs and alcohol are the biggest temptation in Skid Row. It's everywhere I go. This is Frank's story. He started living on San Julian and 5th Street on Skid Row a couple of years ago in an SRO, single-room occupancy, with shared bathrooms, showers, etc. Anyone who lives in the area knows that San Julian is probably one of the toughest streets in the city. Frank has been robbed 4 times, has had items stolen from him more times than I can count. Here are a few of Frank's words from living on Skid Row. May I continue for the second?
Just wrap that up because we have to stick to the law.
Okay. It's a cycle of madness. You can't own anything without it getting stolen. You can't even sit down without being harassed. Gangs stealing and hurting homeless people stealing from other homeless people. I One day I was drunk. I made my way down to one of the missions to get some food. I had a shopping cart with me. I was pushed so hard on the floor, I nearly broke my shoulder. It took some months to heal. You get stuck there, and you just don't know what to do anymore. You're not allowed to be homeless out in the valley. The police and public safety kick you out everywhere. I'm safer and better off out here on the sidewalk of 7th and Broadway than I was in a small apartment in San Julian Street. Yeah, I need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Marianne Curtis. 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute for item number 7. Marianne Curtis.
Good afternoon. Marianne Curtis. I'm retired from the University of California, active in American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, retirees, a group which actively supports the End Homelessness Now LA campaign, which is calling on you to reveal all empty, unused city properties that could be repurposed for housing very quickly if you eliminate the middlemen developers. And I want to urge you to do this. There is no excuse for the number of people who are in the streets and they are dying on your watch. It's high time you do something now. And I want to point to a lot as I walk down here from the Civic Center subway stop. First Street from North Broadway to Spring is an empty lot, which the city proudly announces great things are going to happen here. Those great things should be for the unhoused population who are in tents lined up along that chain link fence that surrounds that park. Now, why can't you do something in your own backyard? Why can't you do something with the Parker Center in your own backyard? Set an example for the rest of the districts and do it now before more people die. You know, I live in Hollywood, your district, Mr. O'Farrell, and I see what's happening there every day. And what is happening is the city is approving more and more developments that take away rent-controlled buildings, and we have an increasing population of people over the age of 63, a disproportionate population of black people in the city who are unhoused. And you just have to do something. I mean, it's past time. We're all attending these meetings. I attend the HHH Oversight Committee meetings. The people are asking you to do it now. Thank you.
Thanks for your participation. Just so you know, all of those projects that require any sort of variance or beyond what's zoned, I've negotiated rent covenanted affordable, in most cases very low income housing out of every one of those projects. And next month we open the bridge housing on a city public parking lot at Schrader, and we'll house 70 people at a time and offer them the services on site. So I'm in this with you. Please stay engaged with my office and with this committee, and we appreciate your input. Thank you. Next we have Nicholas Prevasic. Nicholas Prevasic. You have 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute for item number 4.
Thank you. I'm a longtime resident of downtown now. I'll address item 4 first. With respect to the Mitchell lawsuit, neither expanding Skid Row boundaries nor imposing Skid Row anarchy on the entire city are acceptable solutions. I mean, the current situation is an obvious humanitarian disaster. That's a massive threat to public safety and demonstrably public health. Indeed, there is a person in the city's attorney's office that has now been infected with typhus. I mean, this is ridiculous. Skid Row, as a concept, must be dismantled, not expanded. Services must be distributed throughout the city. Right now, the creation of a community of self-reinforcing despair and depression and drug abuse is causing nothing more than Calcutta-like conditions. The city attorney's job is to defend the best interests of the entire city, not to appease frivolous lawsuits. If Mr. Foyer is unable or unwilling to do that, he should immediately seek other employment, perhaps as the city attorney of Calcutta or as an ATM. Because I tell you, if the objective is to avoid a lawsuit, you have seen nothing yet if that passes, I assure you. Moving on to general commentary, The homeless situation is very complex. The homeless population is far from monolithic. There are many different groups. Chief among those, especially in downtown LA, are the severely mentally ill. The city attorney's office should focus its efforts, instead of fluff stuff, on standing on the desks up in North Sacramento to get the Lanterman Act repealed, use Hhh money to build mental institutions. Like any other ecosystem, if you remove the predators from the environment, the prey items from the environment, the predators will die out, and the parasites. And I specifically mean those who use lawsuits for political power to exploit the homeless for their own needs so cynically. And that may apply to all sides of this issue. It must end, ladies and gentlemen. Not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, now. I see the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. We have next Terry Rubin Roy. Terry Rubin Roy. And you have 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute for item number 4.
Thank you for your time today. My name is Terry Rubin Roy. I'm here to advocate that you go to trial in the Mitchell case. I've lived in DTLA for 9 years. Compared to when I first moved here, I've witnessed conditions on the street getting worse. The tents and encampments on the sidewalks create an obstacle for safe passage and create a public health hazard for the people living on the streets, as well as the thriving neighborhoods that have sprung up around them. The hepatitis A outbreak was a clear message why letting people live in squalor in the streets is unacceptable for anyone. Eliminating limits on personal goods in the public right-of-way will only exacerbate the problem. Skid Row is not a walled-in area that can be contained. No one deserves to live under the current conditions of filth and crime that exist there. We must do better. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. All right, next we're going to hear for comments related to items 5 and 6. And we're going to begin with Annie Orchier, if I pronounce that right. And that is on item 5. You have 1 minute.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Anne Orchier. I'm with the Democratic Socialists of America, Los Angeles, and Olympics, LA. And I just wanted to know, we've heard various acknowledgments that Hhh is not moving at the rate that anyone wants to see it move at, and we've heard a lot of explanations about how complicated this is and how expensive it is, and kind of a lot along the lines of we're doing our best, we're trying everything we can, but we can look at other things City Council is doing and kind of question that, because we know what it looks like when you do everything you can. We can see what you're doing with luxury hotel development in particular, basically moving heaven and earth to make sure that these 100 luxury hotel developments across the city are getting built as quickly as possible, pouring resources into them, giving huge tax breaks and incentives to developers, and none of these things will provide temporary or permanent housing to anyone who needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so colleagues, what I'd like to do, we're going to move on, is I'd like to recommend that we take items 5 and 6 on consent. Items 5 and 6 on consent, if there are no objections to that. That shall be the order then. And what I'd like to do now is go to item 3. Mr. Villanueva, if you could read item 3.
Item number 3 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Wendy Gruhl to the LASA Commission for the term ending June 30, 2023.
Pretty straightforward. Ms. Gruhl, would you like to say anything, or would you like us to just get you reappointed? Let me just take an opportunity to thank you for your service on this LASA Commission so far, and stepping up to be part of LA's strong volunteer corps after a lifetime in public service. So we look forward to working with you, and we really appreciate all of your invaluable input to help us, guide us through this crisis. And we are, I think I speak for everyone when I say we're very grateful for your service. So thank you, colleagues. Just thumbs up to you and appreciation. So without objection, we will send this right to council for reconfirmation. Thank you. That shall be the order. All right. That takes us to item number 1. Mr. Villanueva.
Item number 1 is a CEO transmittal and LASA to report relative to the report and recommendation of the Ad Hoc Committee on Black People Experiencing Homelessness.
Thank you so much. Welcome, panel. If you could just please identify yourselves one at a time, and we can go right into the presentation.
Kelly Bernard.
I think the mics aren't on.
And Peter Lynn.
Are they on yet?
Oh.
All right.
Kelly Bernard. I can't hear myself. Can you hear me? Hello?
There we go.
There we go. Kelly Bernard.
Thank you.
Erin Cox with LASA.
Carla Barrow-Chalif.
Peter Lynn.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Again, my name is Kelly Bernard, and I am Chair of LASA and Vice Chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on Blacks Experiencing Homelessness. I'm excited to be joined by my colleagues at LASA, and we are happy to share with you the final report of the Ad Hoc Committee. I want to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to talk about this important study and the formation of the committee and some of the recommendations that we would like to share with you today, which I think is crucial in our efforts to end homelessness. The Ad Hoc Committee was formed in response to the persistent overrepresentation of blacks experiencing homelessness. As you know, in LA County, blacks represent almost 40% of the homeless population, yet we are only 9% of the overall county population. The formation of the committee was approved by LASA in December of 2017, and we launched in April of 2018. Los Angeles often tagged with being a leader for homelessness, and not for good reason. But I think what's often not said is that we are also on the cutting edge of trying to end homelessness. And I think with the formation of this committee and the work that we are hoping to recommend and for you all to embrace, it's an example of Los Angeles being on the cutting edge of really trying to not just manage homelessness, but end homelessness. This study and its focus on examining the intersectionality of race and homelessness is breaking ground. There's not many that have been done, and people who are doing this. And so I want to thank you for your support of this work and for your willingness to have this courageous conversation. The committee was comprised of 2 LASA commissioners, myself and Commissioner Jacqueline Wagner, who was the chair, and without whose leadership it really wouldn't have happened. And so she couldn't be here today, but I just want to acknowledge the service that she did. We were joined by 24 members of the community who represented a wide swath of different stakeholders, including those with lived experience, advocates, faith-based representatives, housing and service providers, mental health practitioners, and representatives from Councilman Harris Dawson's office. I think Rachel's here. I want to thank her. Representatives from Mayor Garcetti's office, counties, and representatives from County Supervisors Kuehl and Ridley Thomas' office. There are also a couple of other ad hoc committee members who are in the audience. Sean Spear from HSID is here, and we heard earlier from Pete White, who was also on the committee. So I want to thank them as well for their service on this committee. The committee set out to do 3 things. 1, to examine the factors contributing to the overrepresentation of black people among the population experiencing homelessness. 2, identify opportunities to increase racial equity within the homeless service delivery system. And 3, develop recommendations to more effectively meet the needs of black people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. One of the innovative approaches that the committee took was the use of a racial equity toolkit. The Racial Equity Toolkit is a nationally recognized 6-step process designed to inform, assess how policies, programs, and budgetary decisions burden and or benefit black people experiencing homelessness. The toolkit process provided the basis from which the committee developed recommendations. The committee's work included committee meetings examining upstream systems that contribute to the overrepresentation of blacks experiencing homelessness. These systems include It includes the examination of systems like the criminal justice system, employment barriers, the child welfare system, housing, and the coordinated entry system. The committee partnered with researchers from the Homelessness Policy Research Institute's Race Equity Working Group, HPRI, to conduct research and analyze data surrounding various questions facing the committee. The committee also conducted a series of listening sessions and focus groups throughout LA County to learn directly from service providers, community members, and adults and youth with lived experience. It was really important that we balance not only the quantitative data that was provided by HRPI, but balance that with the qualitative data from those with lived experiences and the actual providers. And so it was important that the committee not just meet together, but also take the work out into the community, to various communities throughout LA County. Some of the key themes that emerged across the various issues where these various issue areas that the committee addressed, some of those key themes were an acknowledgement that the current crisis and disparities are a function of systemic challenges rather than individual challenges. And as a result, solutions will require sustained support and funding over an extended period to course correct. In the end, the committee developed 67 recommendations that cut across issue areas and call for cross-system action to advance racial equity. We won't go through all 67 recommendations today, but I would like to turn it over to my colleagues who will share with you just a few of the key insights and recommendations.
Commissioner Bernard, and thank you, council members. As she mentioned, we don't have time to go through everything that the committee discovered today, but really want to elevate some of the key themes that came out of their work, and also particularly some of the recommendations that have relevance for the city. And so, as she mentioned, we started by looking at all of these upstream systems that are integrally related to the homelessness crisis. And so I'll start by elevating some of the key themes that came up there, and then talk more about coordinated entry system and homeless services system more specifically. So a theme that came up throughout the committee's work is really the fact that we can't talk about the disparity in homelessness without recognizing the disparities that exist in other upstream systems and the barriers that Black people face in all systems in our society. And so that was something that the committee really recognized and elevated the need to address those disparities as part of our solution to addressing the disparity within the homeless service system. So within that, one of the recommendations that came out that was elevated, actually, the work that the city has done to establish a civil and human rights ordinance, and encouraging the county to do something similar. And so we would want to encourage the city, as that is implemented, to really be thinking about an emphasis that the committee had over and over was that having laws and ordinances like that on the books are really important as a first step, but we also have to make sure that they're accompanied by enforcement and that there's really teeth behind those to make sure that they're having the intended impact. So another area that the committee looked at is the interrelatedness with the cost of living and lack of employment opportunities and how that impacts people's experiences of homelessness. So it's no surprise that low and stagnant wages exacerbate the situations of homelessness, particularly for Black people. And there's a lot of recognition that employment discrimination is very real and still very prevalent as a barrier for people. So that was recognized on the one hand, and then also on the other hand recognizing that there's a need for continually strengthening the relationships between the homeless service system and the public workforce systems to be able to provide services as people are exiting homelessness so that they have the ability to have housing stability on the other end. So in that area, there's recognition that the city has a fair chance housing ordinance, or sorry, fair chance hiring ordinance, and that is to be commended. And also, again, as we mentioned with the civil and human rights ordinance, wanting to make sure that that's accompanied by adequate supports for enforcement, and that was really elevated through the committee's work. And then also, we look forward, obviously, to working with EWD here in the city to strengthen and move forward a lot of the committee's recommendations around employment and how we can strengthen those connections so that people within our homeless service system are getting connected to the supports that they need. The next area in the upstream system was the intersection between the criminal justice system and homelessness. And so really recognizing the interconnectedness of incarceration and homelessness and how that creates a revolving door that makes the exit from homelessness more complex and then often creates a cycle of returns to homelessness because of other barriers associated with that. And obviously the committee recognized that because Black people are disproportionately impacted by that system, that has strong implications for their disparity within the homeless service system.
And so in that vein, I think there was a recognition that there's a lot of initiatives and good programs that exist right now trying to serve the population reentering society. So there is a recognition that we need to conduct kind of a global landscape analysis to understand what's out there currently within the city and the county and where there might be gaps and opportunities for further strengthening and giving housing as a focus of those services. And then also, I think an area where we would encourage the city to do, as LASA intends to do, is there's recognition that there are a lot of great organizations out there right now that maybe are smaller, that have challenges competing in public funding opportunities, but that are really doing great work by hiring people who have experiences of incarceration and homelessness and are really, because of that, able to be really effective in their delivery of services to this population. And then the final upstream system that the committee looked at is the foster care and child welfare system. It's no surprise, but really the committee's work elevated the huge disparity in the rates of child welfare system involvement being disproportionately high for Black people experiencing homelessness. From the 2017 homeless count, we saw that for unsheltered Black families with children, they were reported involvement with the child welfare system at a rate of 16% compared to 2% for non-Black families. The disparity is slightly smaller for individuals at 16% compared to 14%, but really recognizing that disparity is really underlining a lot of the disparity that we see in the homeless service system. And so unsurprisingly, a lot of the recommendations that came out around this involve us working on initiatives with the county's Department of Children and Family Services. However, there was also a lot of recognition that there's a strong role to be played for community-based organizations in building both supports for families on the front end to prevent child welfare system involvement, but also that there's a lot that can be done to support youth exiting the foster care system to make sure that that doesn't become a feeder into homelessness. And so we encourage the city to look at ways to creatively support opportunities for youth and prioritize existing programs and resources for youth exiting the foster care system. So after the committee looked at all of these upstream systems, they also took a critical look at the homeless service system and at permanent housing more broadly. So the first area within this that we looked at is really the front door of the homeless service system. So we looked at things like outreach services, interim housing, assessment practices, and just access to the system broadly. And one of the themes, there were a lot of recommendations that came out around this area, but one that came up over and over throughout the community listening sessions that we conducted is just the reality that for a lot of people, experiences in interim housing facilities are re-traumatizing or traumatizing experiences. And so I think there's particular relevance here as the city is doing a lot in this area to really be looking at, particularly as a bridge home is rolled out and continues to bring more interim housing into the system, really thinking critically about how we can make sure that that is trauma-informed and that services are delivered and training is provided so that there's trauma-informed and cultural sensitivity in the way that services are delivered there. And then the final area that the committee explored is permanent housing. So both permanent housing through the coordinated entry system, but also more broadly public housing and affordable housing. So within the coordinated entry system, there was a recognition that although people of different race groups are being placed into housing at roughly comparable rates, Black people are seeing a disparity in when we look at rates of returns to homelessness. So for us, that asks a lot of questions. Both what role is housing discrimination in the market more broadly playing, but then also where are there gaps in services or what additional supports are needed to ensure housing stability once people are exiting from our programs. So in that vein, I think there was also a lot of focus on the need for strong tenant protections to combat the housing discrimination that still exists and is very real. So I think for the city, you all actually have a lot of great tenant protections on the books already, but again, accompanying that and making sure that that's accompanied by testing and enforcement to make sure that the laws that exist are actually playing out for people in real time. And I know also the city is working on an ordinance right now about source of income discrimination and making sure that doesn't create barriers for people with Section 8 vouchers, and so encourage the city to continue moving forward with that. And then finally, there was obviously a lot of focus on the fact that there's just a gap in affordable housing and a need for more of that. And so I think a thing that kept coming up too is the recognition that as HHH and other initiatives bring more affordable housing on board, there's really a need to make sure that as new housing is open, that there are really partnerships with key community groups to be making sure that the communities the most in need are aware and know how to access these opportunities. And so that's an area that we would encourage the city as well. And
with that, I'll turn it over to Carla, who will talk a little bit about kind of where we're going from here and our next steps.
Hi, good afternoon. Again, Carla Barrow-Chaliff. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for LAHSA. So since the committee's report was approved by the LAHSA Commission at the end of December, we're working on disseminating the report and recommendations to the relevant stakeholders, groups such as yourself, as well as other key city and county partners and policy-making bodies. In addition to disseminating the committee's report, LAHSA staff are working internally to move forward the committee's recommendations specific to LAHSA. We've embarked on next steps to effectuate a racial equity initiative or action plan. This would focus on both internal practices such as hiring, inclusive policies, trainings, etc., as well as how we contract and influence the providers and systems that we fund. We're working with Race Forward and the Southern California GARE, Governing for Racial Equity, Introductory Learning Year cohort. GARE is a national network of governments working to achieve racial equity and advance opportunities for all. GARE cohorts will implement proven practices and replicate successes, changing the norm of what's expected and possible from government, and will increase our collective impact. We're also in the process of connecting with key partners to advance the recommendations that lie outside of LAHSA. Within the city, we particularly anticipate working with this body, the Office of the CAO, HCID, and EWDD, among others. Another key part of moving this work forward is establishing key metrics that can be used to measure progress toward achieving greater equity within the homeless service delivery system. We will be collaborating with government and community partners to establish methods to evaluate the recommendations throughout implementation. The LAHSA Commission will be providing ongoing oversight of LAHSA's work to advance the committee's work, and will be reporting back biannually on the progress. In addition, recognizing that the set of recommendations put forth by the committee is an extremely complex, multi-layered body of work, we plan to reconvene the ad hoc committee members biannually as well to seek their continued partnership in implementation, in reporting successes, and in troubleshooting challenges and barriers to successful implementation. Finally, we recognize that our efforts in this area are not within a vacuum, but that they're part of a broader racial equity movement. And our hope is that our commitment to this work and our commitment to transparency and sharing our successes and challenges will support the movement for racial equity that's growing locally and across the nation. As we move forward in implementing the recommendations of this committee, we anticipate coming back to this body for your support in advancing many of the specific recommendations that require council action. We will engage with key city partners in the coming months to further flesh out the ad hoc committee's recommendations as they relate to existing city initiatives. One effort currently underway is the draft ordinance to prohibit discrimination based on source of income, which was heard by the Housing Committee on January 23rd. This would prohibit discrimination against people with Section 8 vouchers, as well as participants in our subsidized housing programs, such as LAHSA's Rapid Rehousing Program. We urge the Housing Committee to move swiftly to pass this draft ordinance and bring it to the full City Council for approval. In addition to supporting this draft ordinance, we'd also encourage the Council to parallel the action taken by the County Board of Supervisors last month to advance recommendations related to fair housing. The county's motion sought to support implementation of the county's affirmatively furthering fair housing plan and to incorporate the ad hoc committee's fair housing related recommendations into that plan. LAHSA would look forward to working with HCID to do the same for the city's fair housing plan. LAHSA also looks forward to working with EWDD to implement the committee's employment and workforce development related recommendations. In particular, we look forward to working together to identify opportunities to support workforce center staff to ensure that the unique barriers and challenges facing Black people experiencing homelessness are accounted for throughout the delivery of the employment services. That concludes our report.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much. You just answered one of my main questions, so thank you so much. So we'll open it up for questions here. I have a few to start. In the traumatizing piece of the temporary shelters, is it specific to related to culture? What are some of the traumatizing issues related to the temporary housing or shelters that they're identified in the report?
I mean, it was race specific, but it was also other things as well. So we heard from women who were talking about the trauma that they may have experienced for being harassed, and how that they were triggered again and had that experience. So yes, while many of it was, and much of it was talk, it was very race specific. It did not end there. And I think it was more of a call to action for us to just be mindful about how we, as Aaron talked about, as we roll out more temporary or interim housing, that we are very aware and cognizant about how we make sure that the staff who are staffing those are trained properly, and that the very instruments that we are setting up to help people are not reharming them. So it was across the board.
Do any of your recommendations include just separating based on gender?
That wasn't a specific recommendation that came out of this. Although there were, formerly when we had an ad hoc committee on women and homelessness, there was elevated the need for women-specific shelters through that, but that didn't come up specifically through this committee's work.
And you touched upon this a little bit, but in terms of best practices that other municipalities or even other states, municipalities in California or other states who have done similar research, what are some of the best practices that you have observed, if any?
So I think, kind of as Commissioner Bernard stated, we really learned through this process as we tried to do a lot of outreach, hoping that we would get grand ideas from other areas. We really realized other areas are beginning to wrestle with this, but we're kind of on the forefront of really diving in as deeply as we have. And so we've been in conversation with other communities, but they're at an earlier stage of this work. So I don't think there's a lot yet that's come out around how we address this. But I know at the national stage, too, within the homeless service sector, this is beginning to be an issue that the people are talking a lot more about. So we're hopeful that our work will feed into that and provide some of those best practices as we collaborate with others.
And so as you did this work, has it already begun to impact what LAHSA's approach is in terms of your outreach and the types of surveying you do when you have your case management or your interactions?
So we've implemented trainings, and we have also implemented those trainings for our providers. So although some of the best practices did not come out nationally about the actual service delivery, there are some best practices about the kinds of trainings that providers receive and that outreach workers receive. There's also some information that we received about contracting that could help us in our relationships with the people that we are funding. And so we anticipate continuing to build on those also, work on those.
And I would imagine, I know that when I go out to the encampments, that trust is everything. So someone who has been, someone who is dealing with homelessness, it takes a while to build that relationship before they'll even divulge their true feelings about anything. So I'm curious to see what some of the truths that have been revealed based on some of the outreach workers and some of the findings.
And that was certainly elevated as that we're taking a critical look as a result of this at the way that we train and engage in assessment, because that was something that came up a lot, is that if someone is being asked a large survey at the very first encounter when they haven't built that trust and maybe their immediate safety needs haven't yet been met, that can hamper the effectiveness. So that's something that it's actually really timely that this committee's work, because we're in the process of kind of developing a lot of infrastructure around these practices in the coordinated entry system, and so have really been mindful about that and how that should impact our changes to the system going forward.
And please.
Sorry, we're also very mindful about workforce diversity within LAHSA, especially with our outreach teams, making sure that age, language, and of course race are included in those decisions, so that we make sure we're representative of the population. We have also been mindful and are working as part of these recommendations to talk about the kinds of questions we ask people that when we do encounters, to make sure that is not re-triggering to trauma.
And is your racial equity toolkit, is that being utilized right now as we start taking on clients for this bridge home housing?
The toolkit was a framework in which the committee did its work.
Okay.
And so it just set the table for how we were going to, the lens in which we were going to practice and look at this event.
All right, so the elements are already incorporated into the way you assess
It's
needs?
again, yes, it's at the table about how these recommendations were elevated and brought to you.
But we are training the frontline staff who are participating in the housing placements and the shelter placements.
Terrific. Thank you. Mr. Marquise Harris Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for undertaking this big subject and producing such a coherent and digestible report. You're dealing with one of the central problems to almost anything that happens in the United States. It's anti-black sentiment and white supremacy are in the very DNA of the country, and it shows up almost everywhere, and it shows up in a big way when you have social problems as traumatizing as homelessness. So I thank you for the report. I thank you for starting at the root causes and not trying to answer the question at the level of who's sitting in this encampment, because obviously it doesn't start in the encampment, and those patterns don't start in the encampment. And so we thank you for that. I really appreciate this toolkit that you all used as the guidepost for your study and your inquiry, because it gives a good way to look at it. And you appropriately identify literally every system we have. This issue shows up. So whether it's housing, civil rights attorneys will tell you anti-black housing discrimination is routine in Southern California. Routine. There are housing providers that will tell black people directly, I'm not going to move any black people into this building or any of my properties on a routine basis, and it's very difficult to get it enforced. You talked about child welfare and health systems. I want to use this as an opportunity as well, because we get this a lot in this committee and we get it in other committees, and I think sometimes it's misunderstood. So, and I don't dare to speak for them, but when people get up and stand at that mic and they protest enforcement, it's not, at least for the ones that I know, it's not because they don't believe people who do things wrong shouldn't be stopped and dealt with. They oppose enforcement because it almost always happens in a way that disadvantages people of African descent and sweeps up a lot of people who didn't do anything wrong and are just in the mix. I mean, we are dealing now with a report from our police department that suggests that a unit of our police department in progressive Los Angeles, after all we've been through, stops at a rate of 2-to-1 black drivers over everybody else in the city. Black male drivers over everybody else in the city. Black male drivers make up about 4% of all people in the city of Los Angeles. And so I just want to posit with everybody, this thing gets everywhere. So by the time the person's on the street in the encampment, a lot of other things have likely occurred. One thing I wanted to, one question I had, and it kind of builds on the chairman's question about the way LASA is doing this work. So it's one thing to take the racial equity tool and point it out and look at everybody else. It's another thing to take it and turn it in and look at what you're doing and what we're doing, right? And so I'm just curious, do you all have you thought about metrics that looks at, this is a challenging part of the homeless population, of our contractors, who does the best? Who shows the most success? Who has figured out answers to these questions? And are we looking at organizations that have had a demonstrated history at working with African American populations? So one of the things, Peter, I've pressed you about almost from day one is, how are we going to engage the black church? Because that's traditionally where a lot of this work got done. So I'm curious curious about how you all are using that tool to look internally.
So as Carla indicated, obviously we want to look across a number of different internal processes. Those are internal training processes, our hiring processes, but our contracting is one of the key service delivery. At core, the main way that we address homelessness is to take funding and contract it with service providers. So the work with HPRI to analyze our data is ongoing, and we are drilling down to, okay, look at the service provider layer. At what are the differential success rates for people who have gone through, people of different ethnicities who've gone through these different service provision? Is that a piece of why returns to homelessness are disproportionate for people of African descent? Is that one element of it? But the other thing that we also worked diligently over the past 2 years to do is to expand our capacity to work with smaller organizations and organizations that haven't done business traditionally in public sector. So church, faith-based organizations have traditionally expressed challenges doing business with us because our contracting process, our procurement processes are cumbersome. So what we did internally to help address that was to disaggregate some of our procurement processes. We have a rolling admission now to do business with us. It's our request for statements of qualifications, so that a provider can apply at any time to meet threshold. Those are ongoing rolling admissions, and we can work with the providers in that context, since it's not a competitive process, to get them over threshold. And many new organizations, including faith-based organizations, have come in to do business with LASA through that process. Then, when we have a competitive procurement, we have a ready, qualified list of providers that all they have to bid on are the program performance qualifications. So that has helped new entrants, including those in black areas and black-led nonprofit organizations, to participate in funding opportunities we have. But this is a piece of what we're intending to look at over the next year with the participation in the GARE cohort.
And Councilman, as Aaron talked about, the committee looked at upstream institutions and systems that have an impact, but LASA and the CES system was not removed from that. The committee was highly critical of LASA and of the CES, and what were the barriers and, if any, that LASA was part of, that CES system. And so there are many recommendations directed at not just our upstream partners, but at our own culpability in this. And so you will see those in the recommendations that we spent a lot of time in those committee meetings talking about what role does the CES system and LASA play in the disparity, if any. So we were not immune.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bonner.
Thanks. I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to sort of echo and support everything Mr. Harris Dawson said, and I wanted to thank you for the way you analyze this. I'm struck by page 11 of this report, the key insights, structural institutional racism. There's a participant from a San Pedro listening session who says, structural racism is the issue here. Los Angeles doesn't acknowledge this. How can we have the conversation if we don't acknowledge we live in a racist Los Angeles? And we, and by we I specifically mean white people, don't talk about institutional racism enough. We don't acknowledge it, and we don't examine it, and we don't try to address it. And I'm glad that this report points it out. I mean, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that as long as we have a racist criminal justice system, as long as we have redlining, as long as we have a social service system that takes a black child away from a homeless family at a higher rate than a white child from a white family, and as long as we have employment discrimination, we're going to have more black homelessness. And it's a very sobering foundation for your analysis and for your report, but what it means is that those of us who are not black have to do a lot more work internally and externally to acknowledge this problem and address it. And frankly, it should be more in the forefront of every conversation we have in this building.
You know, you referenced, Councilman, you referenced the quote there on page 11, and that was really important to us to have those, not just to have statistics in the report, but to have the actual words of the community members in there. And so we wanted to make sure that that was peppered in throughout the report, and that's why we went out to San Pedro and to other communities to listen to those with lived experience, the providers and others, and to take their words as they were shared with us and put them in the report so that we did not dilute the impact of what people were experiencing, but that we saw that clear. So,
colleagues, no? Well, thank you so much. This is a fantastic beginning. And we also will look forward to working with the CAO's office, HCID, and EWDD as these 67 recommendations make their way through. Really terrific work, and we thank you for your volunteerism to generate this report. We know it was a heavy lift.
thank you. It's always good to be back at City Hall.
Thanks. All right. So, colleagues, what we'll do is I'd like to recommend receive and file the report. We'll instruct the city administrative officer to review recommendations and incorporate them into the comprehensive homeless strategy and vulnerable population strategy. And as was indicated already, also in concert with CAO office, HCID, and EWDD. And without objection, that shall be the order. Which brings us to item 7. Now, Mr. Lynn, we do have a few comment cards on this. And let's see.
I'm at your disposal.
All right. We just have a few. Let's hear from Pat Barrett. 1 minute for item number 7. I'm sorry, it's not 7, it's, wait.
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for hearing us. Number 1 is we are part of the Constitution. We are here for life, liberty, and justice for all. We don't have that if we settle for Mitchell right now. I am for HHH housing. I'm for supporting the poor, and I'm also an advocate for the Downtown Women's Center. Mr. Farrell, you said at the beginning we have the largest homeless population here, and the reason we being this, and I'm not just saying this, I've talked to cops, I've talked to people that have been robbed, and I've talked to people on the streets. We have the cheapest drugs in the country. We also have child pornography, and each tent is labeled for what it has. There is drugs being peddled that is seen from SUVs handling all the time. Open prostitution with women half naked. We cannot, and if we settle for this, Mitchell versus the city of LA, we are going to continue having the most crime and the most homelessness, and there's many people that are in the streets that need help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I apologize, everyone. My paper wasn't matching the screen, so we're going to go to item 2, which is what Mr. Lynn was waiting for, but we do have a few comment cards on that, so Mr. Villanueva, if we could read item 2.
Certainly, sir. Item number 2 is the Executive Director of LASA Oral Status Report relative to ongoing development and implementation of homeless strategies and policies, services, operation, and other items of interest.
Okay, and it looks like we do not have any comment cards for item 2, so Mr. Lynn, I welcome you back to the table. Thank you.
Welcome, Chair O'Farrell. Thank you, council members. I think, so the topic obviously covered a lot of ground, and I'm not going to try to do that. I thought that I would share some high-level updates on the work in the COC, and also maybe just give a brief overview of the work that LASA does and what LASA's role is to sort of frame out conversations that we can build on over the course of the coming year. LASA has 3 primary responsibilities. One is direct service, and we do outreach through LASA staff who are deployed countywide. They have a heavier presence in the city, and they work very closely with the city. We also do direct service provision through contracts. That is the primary thing that we do, is we take public sourced funding from the city, from the county, from the state, from the federal government, and we combine those into what we hope to be comprehensive service packages that will address the needs of people experiencing homelessness and get people housed across the city and the county. We, through that effort, I described that briefly in the conversation in the previous topic. We work with our funders very closely, and we also work with the requirements that those funding sources have. So there are a number of different sources that we blend together for that. And the third thing that we try to do is to bring system-level coordination. So we have a role in bringing together all of the various public and private entities that address homelessness and work together in a collaborative infrastructure of meetings and publicly available forums to bring a comprehensive look at and address of homelessness. So among those are working with policy leaders and with thought leadership. So we work with research to investigate topics along the lines of what we just discussed, but also with regard to practice standards and elevating those and bringing the best thinking nationally and internationally to the work that we deliver. We work with our local environment to develop policy guidance. One of the things we'd like to bring back to you soon is policy guidance that we've put forward and has taken robust public input with regard to unsheltered homelessness. There is a serious crisis in Los Angeles with people in encampments and experiencing unsheltered homelessness. A lot of intersection with the enforcement that we were just heard earlier and we were discussing. And we, using the role that we play in the city and the county, took input from municipalities and from the city and from the county to develop a sort of unified guidance that we recommend in taking the approach with regard to address of unsheltered homelessness. And that's the kind of thing that we're working to bring to the entire region. We also have a role in applying for federal homelessness assistance, and I think you may have seen in the news, we just got our renewals for last year. We had actually, we did extremely well, $114 million in renewals, and we just today learned that we had received almost all of the new money that we had applied for. We applied for $5 million in domestic violence focused grants, and we got all of those. So we have a new resource to deploy with a combined transitional housing, rapid rehousing grant form that was not something that we had access to before. So there's a new set of resources we can deploy. We also won $3.2 million in new federal permanent supportive housing funding. So that's over 200 new units of permanent supportive housing to fund for the continuum. Most of those grants, although we aggregate the application, we work on the strategy to make our application the most competitive that we can, and we do the application, the grant funding doesn't actually flow through LAHSA. Most of that grant funding it comes to LA through our public housing authority. So HACLA receives the lion's share of that. The County Housing Authority also receives a significant, and then there are grants that are applied for by some of the smaller public housing agencies, and the lion's share of federal funding flows through them. But we have a role in making sure that our application is robust and competitive. We also have a responsibility in doing some of the other federally required responsibilities like the homeless count, which we just completed, and I really appreciate the support that we got from all your offices in getting volunteers, in citing our deployment centers. It was an extremely successful count, one of the operationally smoothest that we've ever had, more than 8,000 volunteers. Angelinos are very focused on this issue, and they turned out in great numbers to participate and count in their communities, which gives us the opportunity to cover all the census tracts in the county of Los Angeles. All 4,000 square miles were covered by people actually going and visibly seeing them. So tremendous participation in the homeless count. That is one of our annual responsibilities. It takes us time to collate that information with the street demographic surveys that give us an understanding of ethnicity, of other kinds of challenges that people are facing, put that together in a demographic and geographically specific survey. We'll deliver that back out to Los Angeles at the end of May. So that will give SPA level data, city and CD level data on all the demography that we capture in that count. We have, as I stated, in our contracting responsibility, we put out a number of different service offerings that covers from the front end on outreach. We fund outreach, we directly serve outreach, and we coordinate with county-funded outreach. So there's a really robust infrastructure now to coordinate street-based outreach that we did not have before the funding from Measure H has given us extensive reach and funded the activity that is quite time-consuming and labor-intensive, but necessary to hold down the center and play sort of dispatch and coordinate and collaborate that. We have those kinds of roles in all service planning areas, and there's a really rich collaboration now. So we stood up an infrastructure called LA HOP, the Homeless Outreach Portal, that allows citizens and council offices, bids, senior lead officers, other folks who want to get outreach connected to an individual that they're seeing, and provide an opportunity for folks to make those requests through an online portal. Those, when we're taking those requests in, we're delivering them right out to the dispatchers, and those can get right out to street outreach, and most of them actually see somebody deployed within 24 hours. So there's a really good connected and coordinated outreach infrastructure.
Mr. Lee, excuse me, do you have any sort of data on getting through the HOP, that portal, people into under a roof?
So we have a set of data on sort of our response, and what I'd like to do is come back to you with a coordination of how quickly we can dispatch to, like, how long it takes to actually do that. We don't provide that information through to the requester, but we can through a couple of ways look at it within our data system within HMIS. So that's something that we can do. The other program I wanted to elevate right now, just because the weather has been so inclement and so cold, is the winter shelter program. So we have a responsibility to stand up winter shelter as a seasonal program. We have an infrastructure that covers the city and the county. We've seen pretty high utilization over the last few weeks based on the rain and based on the cold, and that is a piece of infrastructure that we stand up on an annual basis. So we also have spillover sites for some of those sites when we go to 24 hours with those sites when the weather is inclement. Sometimes we even have more demand in those sites when the weather is inclement, and we have additional capacity that we have put together with some recreation centers and so forth. They can take spillover capacity, and we've deployed that more times this year than we did last year. So there is a continuing demand for that. I think it was reported at the Homelessness and Poverty Committee last time that there were 2 winter shelters that were still coming on, and those have both come in. So there's 47 beds at each of those, and those are both in the city. So they're both, just to relate to the committee that work was completed, and those shelters are actually online at this point. I would, there isn't an enormous amount of ground to cover. One of the things I just wanted to elevate to the committee at this point is the governor released his proposed budget for the coming fiscal year. There was essentially sort of HEAP 2.0 in that. I think there's a rich opportunity for the city and the county to work together to advocate for making that funding as flexible and as robust as possible. So we look forward to working with you on that. The other opportunity I would like to draw the city's attention to is that the recommendations for year 3 for Measure H funding should be posted publicly in the week of March 5th. There will be a public comment period from March 5th to March 20th, and then those will be brought together with the recommendations that were already put forward and reviewed, and we expect that those to be voted on at the Board of Supervisors on May 15th of this year. So looking forward to obviously the interest on that side as well. And I'm happy to entertain any questions. I'm also happy to focus on any particular area that you'd like in future presentations.
Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing more about some of the results of the data that you've been collecting at a future hearing. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Colleagues? Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
Are you starting to see a decline in the number of available service providers as it comes to the emergency winter shelter, or are there a larger suite of operators that might be able to fulfill that role?
We did have some new providers come in to take that work on. So there were some who declined, there were some who came back, and there were some new ones. So it's a balance on that side. But we were able to deploy all the units that we had funding for.
Okay, and the evaluations are ongoing in terms of the providers that we are currently contracted with?
That's correct. That's correct. So we are actually working with technical assistance from HUD to look at the way that we monitor and do compliance checking on those contracts. And so we've stood up an active contract management office to keep close ties on their performance on a monthly basis. We're also working on our ongoing monitoring and compliance side to make sure that they're meeting all of their compliance related objectives as well. So we're working to revise that and get it both less administratively burdensome, but also more closely tied to programmatic outcomes and what we're all trying to achieve.
Geographically, is there a larger percentage of available service providers, say, in other parts of the city versus in the San Fernando Valley? Or are there limited service providers when it comes to emergency shelters in the San Fernando Valley?
I think I'd like to get more detail from my staff and come back to you to report on that. So there are different availabilities of service providers in different service planning areas. Metro LA is one of sort of the richest areas. I don't think of San Fernando Valley or Service Planning Area 2 as being a particular deficit in terms of service providers, but I'd like to come back to you with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. And colleagues, this is a verbal update that we'll hopefully have the pleasure of hearing on a regular basis.
I'm at your disposal.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, and so that does bring us to item 7. And so, Mr. Villanueva, if you please read item 7.
Certainly, sir. Item number 7 is Proposition HHH, Administrative Oversight Committee transmittal relative to the Proposition HHH Permanent Supportive Housing Loan Program Letter of Commitment for the Vermont-Manchester project to meet the State of California Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Programs February 11, 2019 funding deadline.
Thank you. And before I get to Mr. Gibson, we have one more comment card on item 7, and that is, is it PT? I understand for item 7. I just have the initials P and T, capital P, small t, for item 7. No? Perhaps not then. All right. So that does complete it. And I understand, Mr. Ed Gibson, I just have some quick clarification. That's the only reason that I understand that the Administrative Oversight Committee gave its approval for this item.
That is correct.
Okay. And it was my understanding that the Citizens Committee had some concerns, but that they've been addressed?
That is correct. They pushed it forward with no recommendation. They had additional questions, which we resolved at the Administrative Oversight Committee. This is a project that's larger than it appears. So we discussed a 62-unit senior portion that's supportive housing, and it's really part of a 180-unit project for which we will also get an additional 30 units of permanent supportive housing, which we're not funding. So all-encompassing, making sure they understood the numbers, and so we brought all that information forward to explain that it's a bigger project than it looks like.
Terrific. Thank you. I just wanted to get that clarification, and I really appreciate that. Mr. Harris-Dawson, we're good to go. All right. So thank you so much, Mr. Gibson, for that. And without objections, we will approve item 7. That'll be the order. Thank you so much. Which brings us to our last item, item 4. Please read the item.
Item number 4 is an item that was continued from October 3, 2018. The committee may recess to closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D1 to confer with its legal counsel relative to the case entitled Carr Mitchell et al. Versus City of Los Angeles et al. United States District Court Case Number 16 CV 01750 SJO JPR. This matter involves litigation that alleges constitutional violations based on the seizure and destruction of property of homeless individuals in the Skid Row area of Los Angeles. The Budget and Finance Committee waived consideration of the matter on September 5, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Villanueva. This case does involve litigation with the City of Los Angeles, so it will be a closed session item. However, we'll take public comment first. And so everyone will have 1 minute to speak, and we will begin with Laurie Sale. Laurie Sale will be followed by Blair Beston, followed by S, initial S.
Hi, my name is
Lori Sale, and I'm here today to urge you to hire an outside counsel to not settle the Mitchell case. If the city settles, this will be even more ways for us to tie the hands of the law officers and sanitation people. We have more fires, more health hazards, and this further lawlessness, this further lawless behavior that is making downtown LA and other areas impossible. I'm a third-generation liberal property owner. I'm the vice president of the Fashion District BID, and I'm an officer, and we pick up over 18,000 pounds of garbage a day, and that's on top of what is collected from the BID people, because the city can't do that anymore. Anyhow, the drug. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sale. Blair Beston, followed by S, followed by Kiri. Is Blair Beston in the house? We'll move on to S, initial S. How about Kiri? And then after that will be Betsy Starman.
Hello there. We are all very sympathetic to the suffering of those that are homeless and living with addiction and mental health issues. My father's own gambling addiction brought him to the Ford Hotel back in the 80s. In 1980, I moved to downtown, and during my younger years, I was homeless in DTLA. Today I am recovered and focusing on 12-step programs. We feel that the Mitchell injunction failed. Tents were immediately breaking the law, and we're not supposed to be up from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., creating very unsafe situations and impassable sidewalks. We have seen that tents create safe refuge for drug dealers and organized crime to set up shop and prey on those self-medicating. Mitchell should not be settled. The conditions created should not be acceptable for anyone involved and is actually harmful to all. At least 50% of downtown's homeless are dealing with addiction, creating a mental illness chicken or the egg question. Skid Row is a party for many. The tents only grow because people are coming from all over the nation to commiserate.
Thank you. And for clarification, are you S?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Kiri, followed by Betsy Starman, followed by Kirk Gaw, and then Daniel Peterson. Are you Kiri?
I'm here.
Okay.
It seems odd to be settling on a case that keeps the status quo as it is. We can't really believe that the outbreaks of serious diseases that a judge won't see this differently. The lawsuit is about stuff. It is not about people. It is about some kind of principle that keeps people on the streets and keeps people unsafe, and they're easy prey and easy to be preyed upon. We're not doing them a service. And just as my speaker before me said, I also am a recovering addict, and I can guarantee you that if somebody said to me, you get to stay out here and you don't have to move and you can have all your stuff here with you, I'd still be there now, because it doesn't work that way. We don't think the same way other people think. And unless you've been there and unless you know that, maybe sometimes it's difficult to form a better, overall view of this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy Starman, Kirk Gaw, and Daniel Peterson. Betsy Starman, Kirk Gaw, Daniel Peterson, followed by Sean Smith. Oh, you were Betsy. So Kiri is not here. Okay. Are you Kirk?
Yeah, I'm Kirk Gaw. Hi.
All right, Kirk Gaw.
Hi. I'm a longtime resident at 6th and Spring, and I'm against the settling of this Mitchell case. I'm concerned about the quality of life in the historic core since Prop 47 and Prop 57, but I know this is about the Mitchell case. So many downtown LA residents have been subject to inhumane acts over the last 4 years, even murders by transients who seem to be fixed on the drug culture. Myself, I have over 25 LAPD reports after being attacked by drug gang members in the historic core on the street that I live on, and they're posing as homeless. They're living in tents. They're refusing to join civilization. and I believe settling the Mitchell case will only reward the criminals, and it'll state that they win. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, okay. Let's hold it down. So Betsy Starman, I understand, is not here. Just wanted to mention. Oh, I'm sorry. So please, let's get Betsy Starman off my screen. I keep getting confused with Carrie. My apologies. Daniel Peterson, followed by Sean Smith, followed by Scott Yamabe.
I'm Daniel Peterson, and I also want to make an appeal to y'all not to settle the Mitchell case. My comments will be kind of redundant, but the truth is the truth, and so you're going to hear it over and over from people that are really enlightened about this issue. I don't have a lot to say about it, but every bit of it is informed by my own personal experience. I too have been homeless for a long time, and if someone were to have told me, you can stay in this tent, you can keep all your stuff, we're going to bring you, well-meaning people that are misguided will bring you water and sandwiches and food and stuff like that, then I never would have had to bite the bullet and surrender to the fact that I had to go and get help. I could have just kept using, and I would have not been here anymore because I'd probably be dead. So that is not going to help anybody, but it harms people, and it harms the people that are trying to exist in the area amidst all this stuff. I'm tired personally of having to step over needles to get into the place that I live, and so that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Sean Smith, Scott Yamabe, Patty Berman.
Good afternoon. Scott Yamabe from the Flower Market.
Okay.
I'd just like to urge the committee to fight the good fight with the Mitchell case. We've been on our area for over 100 years, and we've seen it deteriorate in the last 10 or 15. We're kind of in the front line of all the social issues that downtown currently faces. They say that politics is the art of compromise. However, in this case, we shouldn't compromise in this area. It's a social problem that needs to be fixed, and settling would not be the resolution. So we urge this committee to go forward. I'd just like to submit a letter that we gave to the previous committee here with a bunch of signatures from our tenants, buyers, florists, owners, and whatnot. So thank you.
Thank you. Sean Smith, Patty Berman, Alexandra Lay.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Lay. I'm a 14-year resident of downtown Los Angeles, and I'm here to advocate for the litigation of Mitchell v. City of Los Angeles for all of the sound reasons that have already been articulated. Thank you.
Thank you. Olivia Lee. Olivia Lee. All right, maybe Olivia. Oh, okay. Followed by Jessica Law.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Olivia Lee with the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber has been a proud partner of the city's Measure H, Prop HHH, advocating Sacramento for additional funding, supporting our efforts on storage shelters and the Bridge Home Program. We are here today to urge you to move this item to a full city council meeting, as this is a vital citywide issue. Additionally, we do not want the settlement to single out downtown. Treating our downtown community differently than the rest of the city would be an acceptance of an even lower quality of life for those experiencing homelessness. It would discourage the use of all the facilities and services we have invested in, creating a permanent sidewalk life for many of our most vulnerable residents. Thank you so much for your continued work and commitment in combating homelessness.
Thank you. Jessica Law will be followed by Tom Gilmore and Ellen Riotto.
Good afternoon, council members. Welcome to the committee, Chair O'Farrell and Council Member Rue. I'm Jessica Law, President and CEO of the Central City Association, and I'm here today to ask this committee to reject the current settlement and continue this important discussion with the rest of your colleagues on the City Council. This is a citywide policy issue and should be treated as such. As you know, this is the third closed session meeting on this case, and there were more than 100 people that came out to the last two meetings asking this committee to reject a downtown-specific settlement. And our coalition of social service providers, business, and community leaders are here again today. Downtown, as you know, has become an area challenging for homeless individuals to recover, and this standard should not be tolerated. We support the constitutional protections for all people, especially our most vulnerable population, which is why one neighborhood should not be treated different than the other. Thank you for your leadership on resolving this crisis. Thanks.
Thank you. Tom Gilmore, followed by Ellen Riotto, followed by Mike Arnold.
Thank you. My name is Tom Gilmore. I'm living and working in downtown Los Angeles for the last 27 years. I want to thank you, the three of you, for your service to this city and what you're doing with regard to the homeless situation in this city. It's an incredible problem that has reached critical mass right now, and I think you're responding to it. And while the results may not seem immediate, and I know it's a long haul, your personal commitment to it has been admirable, and I really do appreciate it. With that in mind, I want you to think about this, the Mitchell settlement, the potential Mitchell settlement, and hopefully reject it, because in the big picture of things, we cannot continue in this cycle of litigation, settlement, and litigation again. I think it's really important for us to build on the good work that you're doing right now and to make certain that we move forward, not backward, and a settlement in this particular case is moving backward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ellen Riotto, and I'm the Executive Director of the South Park Business Improvement District. I'm here to urge this committee against a settlement of the Mitchell case. Simply put, it is bad public policy to deny people in downtown the same rights to a clean and safe environment that are given to other residents in the city. In the long run, settling this case would benefit exactly 0 people. Not the individuals living on the streets, not the residents living in the buildings, not the business owners or employees who work in the area. We can and must do better, and it starts with decisions like the one before you today. Finally, this issue should be taken out of this committee and introduced to the full council, where it should move to trial in order to avoid setting a dangerous precedent, a precedent that further restricts the city's ability to make real progress on housing and homelessness. Thank you.
Mike Arnold will be followed by Devin Strecker, followed by Lydia Oliveira.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Mike Arnold. I'm president and CEO of the Midnight Mission, a 104-year-old nonprofit serving homeless men, women, and children in Skid Row. I'm here to urge this committee to reject a settlement on the Mitchell case. Skid Row includes not only the largest street homeless population, but also the largest concentration of people who are formerly homeless trying to get and keep their lives on track for a better life than living on the streets. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a noticeable decline in our neighborhood from a place that was reasonably safe as a neighborhood to almost a place where almost all of us fear to walk at night. In our conversations with law enforcement, they say their hands are tied trying to protect these residents. We believe everyone in LA deserves to walk through their neighborhood without the threat of violence, assault, or drug dealing. Settling the Mitchell case without recognizing the impact it will have on folks who are sincerely trying to get better would be both devastating and extremely unfair.
Devin Strecker, followed by Lydia Oliveira, followed by Reina Letty.
Hi, I'm Devin Strecker, Interim Executive Director of the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance. I'm here to urge the committee to not settle this lawsuit. I am very hopeful about some of the measures that we as a community and a city have taken to address homelessness, including Measure H, HHH, and I want to thank you personally for your leadership on helping to bring a bridge housing facility right to Hollywood, to the center of Hollywood. But I believe that settling this lawsuit would be a step in the wrong direction. Homelessness is a citywide problem, and this would separate out a certain standard for one area of the city when it should we should be thinking about the entire city. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I've got your name way wrong, so please clarify for my benefit.
With you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Claudia Oliveira, Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council, speaking in my private capacity.
Solving homelessness takes multi-solutions. I am the first to be here and advocate for shelter. I've been here many, many times in this podium. The Downtown Women's Center has a 95% success rate. LA Mission Life Start program has a 78% success rate. You know what doesn't have a success rate? Tents. Tents are not a bridge to a home. As part of an urban needs committee, I have boots on the ground and I have had one-on-ones with hundreds of victims of tents activities. A majority of tents are harbor for drug dealing and exploitation of women. Those who are actually homeless in tents are often forced to give their entire Social Security checks to gang lords. Medicine and blankets are not bulky items, but 20 bikes, refrigerators are strategically placed in front of tents to visually obstruct illegal activity. It's the city attorney's job to defend these victims. Settling without a trial is a setback, a disservice, and a disgrace. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Excuse me. Rena Letty and Ms. Oliveira, you just spoke, so I think she's on there twice, followed by Pat Barrett.
Hi, I'm Rena Letty, the Executive Director of the Fashion District Bid, and I'm here with a number of stakeholders from the Fashion District and the flower markets. Most of our stakeholders are family-owned, longtime owners, and they care about this neighborhood. The bid has operated for 23 years to be a clean and safe environment for working, visiting, and living, and that includes our now more than 400 people that live on the sidewalks within the boundaries of the bid. This is a threefold increase in people living on our streets, and it correlates to a threefold amount of trash that the bid picks up. You heard earlier 18,000 pounds of trash a day. The accumulation of belongings on the public right-of-way impacts the quality of life for everyone downtown. It encourages fleas, ticks, bed bugs, and lice, which of course turns into the outbreaks that we've recently seen with Hep A and typhus. We cannot maintain a clean and safe neighborhood, which is what our stakeholders expect and what our city contract mandates that we do, if we do not have some control over the public realm. I encourage you to try the case. Thank you.
Pat Barrett, followed by John Dubler, followed by initials capital C, small q.
Hello again. My name is Pat Barrett, and I am a private citizen living in South Park. Again, we cannot settle Mitchell versus the city of LA for the following reasons. Crime has increased. We're not taking care of our homeless people, especially older people. That has increased anybody over 62, it's increased 62%. We also need to have more housing like the women's shelter, which is a 95 to 98% success rate, and that has been proven. We do not need to put bridge housing in their parking lot. We need to move forward and put more shelters there. We need to protect the kids that I've seen homeless in tents and keep the drug pushers away. We cannot settle Mitchell versus the city of LA. Thank you.
Thank you. John Dubler, followed by capital C, small q, followed by Carl Cade.
Good afternoon. I'm here in my capacity as the General Manager and Counsel of Downtown Management Company. We own and manage property in downtown Los Angeles. On a personal note, I'm also a resident of downtown Los Angeles. I'm here to request the committee reject any settlement of the Mitchell case that would either...
Hey, hold his time, please. Let's wait until the door closes. Apologies.
Thank you. I'm here to request the committee reject any settlement of the Mitchell case which either preserves the status quo, expands the current conditions, or in any way encourages the expansion of the homelessness problem in Los Angeles. The city has entered into settlements like this in the past. They've done nothing to solve the problem. We are only requesting that the city solve the homelessness problem and either try the case or enter into a settlement that is based in solution. Again, any settlement that expands or accepts the current status quo is completely unacceptable to both the business owners and the citizens of Los Angeles. And please note, any settlement that would specify any area in downtown Los Angeles as different than any other part of Los Angeles is additionally unacceptable to us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, there's someone who filled out a card that just says CQ. I think maybe that's a mistake. So we have Carl Cade, Suzanne Hawley, and Hal Bastian. Suzanne Hawley and Hal Bastian. I think Carl Cade is not here. All right.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Suzanne Hawley. I am President and CEO of the Downtown Center Business Improvement District. I am here today to ask you not to settle this case. The injunction under Mitchell effectively eliminated the 60-gallon limit on personal goods and has largely contributed to the rise in tents and personal goods on the sidewalks. Settling under these terms allows for the further densification of personal property on downtown streets, which creates more opportunity for the kinds of health risks which we saw last year with the typhus outbreak. We are very concerned that this also contributes to preventing people from seeking services by making life on the sidewalk permanent. And if there is any consideration that settling this for Skid Row will somehow contain this issue, it will not. This will simply serve as a model for the rest of the city. The inhumane conditions that currently exist on the sidewalks downtown should not be the standard for our homeless neighbors. If the city were to settle Mitchell under the current terms, the standard would become permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. Hal Bastian will be followed by Marcus Ham, followed by Linda Becker.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Hal Bastian, and I'm a resident of downtown, and I've been here in the community for 27 years. Yesterday, I celebrated my 18th anniversary of being clean and sober, and the only difference between me standing here in council chambers and being in a tent in Skid Row, Councilmember O'Farrell, is if I drink or use again. So I have nothing but empathy for people in the streets. That said, we believe in the civil rights of people who are mentally ill and homeless, but there's also 99.9% of us other people in the community that have rights too. And we cannot settle this case. Please hire outside counsel. Our good city attorney has failed in his office at every level on every lawsuit. We need outside counsel to do this. Do not settle it. And we have homeless encampments right here across from the LA Times on First Street, right across from City Hall. It's not okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Marcus Ham, followed by Linda Becker, followed by Craig Roberts.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Ham. Although I stand here just as myself, I am actually in representation of over 1,000 members of the downtown LA community. I've served as a community manager for over 7 years for several of the properties in downtown LA. I've also been directly impacted by activity, including assault and battery from members of the transient community in downtown LA. In this Mitchell case, I of course am asking that you work to reject this case in order to allow for the services that I believe are being offered and are continuing to be built and developed in order to get the homeless off of the streets. We all deserve better. Tents are not the answer. The people who are living on the streets, I do believe, as much as they may want to continue to do so, it is not in their best interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Becker, followed by Craig Roberts, and our last speaker is Jasmine Ho.
Good afternoon, committee. As many people have said already, much better than probably I, that we do have a public health crisis in the city. Please do not settle the Mitchell case. This will not solve the problems. It will exacerbate it. The voters did pass HHH, and the lack of action on the part of the city and the county, whoever's responsible for releasing those funds, it's disgraceful. The key problem here is the need for mental health care and housing. The suggestions made earlier to provide unused city properties to build housing is a great idea. We need to free up that money. Settling the Mitchell case will open the doors to more frivolous lawsuits. You pass laws to help curtail the homeless issues on our streets, and now you need to stand up and defend your hard work. We apparently need to hire outside counsel to help defend the rights of all of its citizens who deserve to be able to walk down their sidewalks, which are a public right-of-way.
We need to do a better job protecting those who cannot help themselves. They deserve better than this. Please do not settle.
Thank you. Thank you. Craig Roberts, followed by Jasmine Ho on this item number 4. Either of you in the chamber? All right, so that completes the comment cards on item number 4. We'll hear general public comment later, but we're going to go into closed session right now. So we'll take a couple of minutes to clear the chamber for this closed session item. Thank you. Is everyone here who's going to be here? I just want to make sure before we go to general public comment, I see 3 people in the gallery who came back. Thank you for your patience. Have any of you filled out cards for item 4 or any other items? General public comment only, is that correct? What I have here is I have John Motter, Linda Becker, Allison Schallert, and Craig R. for general public comment. Is Linda Becker or Allison Schallert here? I don't see John Motter. I don't see Craig R. Ladies, did you fill out a comment card?
I'm Allison.
Oh, you're Allison. Oh, please step forward and for general public comment.
Oh. Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm Allison Schallert. I really want to thank you. I really want to take this opportunity to thank you. What a great job your office has done on public outreach about the Bridge Home, and keep on going and keep on building. And then I also want to congratulate you on your comment about when there are variants to add supportive housing, or low-income housing. I really have been at a lot of meetings lately all over the city, and there's tremendous public support for housing, building housing. And you all, everybody else, needs to take a lesson from you, and now nobody's here, but from you and Bonin of getting it done. And look at what your office did and be an example for these other districts that aren't doing anything. And we have the support. I've been mobilizing people. I am so ready. With 100 people, I can show up anywhere. So I really think that you should take even more of a leadership role. Thanks.
Thank you so much. If I wasn't sitting here, I'd be hugging you. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Are you Linda Becker? No? Ma'am, did you fill out no, you were good? All right, so that I think we're done.
That clears the desk, sir.
That clears the desk. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.